Question number one is talking about crowdfunding, grants, and options. Let's talk about crowdfunding for everybody who would think about and could be interested. Remember, there are multiple types of crowdfunding. There is equity crowdfunding and there is rewards-based crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding is when you go out to the crowd and you do a Reg CF, standing for crowdfunding, and you say, I can take investment in for $500 a piece, $200 a piece, and you can raise up to a certain amount from unaccredited investors. What's super important about this is that unaccredited investors, typically you can't solicit to them. You can solicit to certain types of accredited investors if they are a venture capital fund, angel group. You can solicit them cold, but you can't solicit high net worth individuals unless they say, I'm an accredited investor. And you can't solicit them outside your network and via public means, public solicitation, unless you file the proper regulations and there's compliance and all those things. Why? Because we don't want scams. Because the government doesn't want scams. The SEC, FINRA, all the financial regulatory authorities out there do not want scams to happen. So when, I believe it was Barack Obama, he passed something called the Jobs Act, which allows you to solicit to the general public and use the internet. And that's where sites like Fundable, which we own, formed. And now you got WeFunder, you've got Start Engine, you got all these other companies out there that help with Reg CF and Reg D raises, which is a little bit of a different thing where you're raising from accredited investors. Reg CF is great, but let me tell you, you need to have an audience. You're not just going to put your offering out there and people are just going to magically find you. It's the same thing with rewards-based crowdfunding, which is where you sell your product or service ahead of time and you say for trusting and pre-buying, let's say it costs $100, and you say, all right, I'm going to sell it ahead of time for $50 a piece, and they collect your money for you. You're rewarding them and you're saying thank you very much. And that's a great way to raise money and to prove that you've got validation in the marketplace. But any crowdfunding requires you to have a built-in audience. It can be extremely powerful, and the reason being is that you can have your investors become your raving fans. I have a founder who did a crowdfunding campaign, Reg CF raise, on an AI engine for like news, and he chose crowdfunding, and he's since raised like $2.5 million, probably more. It's been a while since I've connected with him. I should follow up with him. But his investors are raving fans. They want to support everything. That's how that works. That might be advantageous for you, but you have to have that built-in audience. I know a founder who raised a bunch of money, I think 5 figures, not 5 figures, 6 figures of money. Yeah, maybe 5, 6 figures. And the reason he raised that level of money is because he already had a built-in audience. He had a social media channel. Typically speaking, if you're going to do crowdfunding, you want to have 50% of your campaign. This is for equity and for rewards already lined up ahead of time, and say, as soon as we open it up, you're going to invest in. That's the reason a lot of people say the only companies, startups that are successful at crowdfunding are the ones that would have gotten funded anyway. And that's how you do it. You raise 50% because as soon as you invite the public and you start getting visibility, eyeballs start coming to your campaign from people who don't know you, they're going to see that it's already funded, and that sends a signal of trust. Well, what did you do? It's all optics and it's all perception. When I did crowdfunding, I've done multiple crowdfunding campaigns and they have been successful. I pound the phones like we're talking to investors, and I make my team raise money every day, and we watch a dashboard and we say this amount of money came in, this amount of customers came in, and we watch through it. The last 50%-ish typically happens in the last 10 days. It's kind of crazy. So you start raising, and then there's totally this rush that happens at the end of the campaign, and you're creating this FOMO. We only have 10 days left. Here we go. This is the only time you're going to get in on the stock or the product at this rate, and that's what's going to happen. So you got this mad dash, and the best campaigns, take roughly 3 months, but it's usually 60 days is when the action really happens, and that's crowdfunding's a great option. The same is true for government funding, but government funding, you need to already have things loaded up. You need to be credible with the government, and government funding is a great option, but it takes so long. We're talking like 18 months. So don't do government funding as a primary source. Do it as an ongoing thing, knowing that even if they award you, you are going to end up waiting like 18 months. Usually they do their budgets and they say next year, we got you in. And I've talked to founders who have gotten commitments from the government, only have the government change. Somebody comes in the office and then they scrap all the plans, or there's a shutdown in the government. There's all these standoffs. It is really tough So government funding, you don't want to rely on that the same way that you don't want to rely on suddenly crowds coming and investing in your startup, poof, out of thin air. You have to have built-in audience, built-in credibility for you to do crowdfunding and government funding. But it is possible, and I know many founders that have been very, very successful. One of the earliest crowdfunding campaigns that I supported was Pebble. It was like the first smartwatch. It was so good that all they did was release. They're a Y company or a back company. All they did was release products on Kickstarter. That's all they did. And then I watched WeFunder campaigns do really well, especially if you got big names behind them. So that's how you do crowdfunding is viable. I've got something special. If you're listening to this clip or you've been here, we are going to show you how to use Fundable for your own friends, family, associates. It's a Reg D, allows you to reach out beyond your network to accredited investors. It's not the same as Reg CF completely, but it could give you the taste and allows you to test your campaigns and see if you're even up for something like crowdfunding, because the law, the amount of money that you have to invest to make a successful crowdfunding campaign is significantly high. But what's great, if you're wondering, if you get crowdfunding and let's say you get 1,000 investors that chunk in like $100 a piece and you got $100,000, you can roll them all up in something called a special purpose vehicle and you can treat them all as one investor. And that's one of the best parts about new laws and the way that you can do it, and tools such as Carta. I think Carta lets you handle it. AngelList, I believe. There are lots of other companies. WeFunder, if you use WeFunder, they basically give you all the tools that you need to do all the legal. That's my DD on crowdfunding.